So we know that Sayyidah Zainab salamu alayha, both in her, how she raised her children and in what happened after the martyrdom and the shahadat of her brother, she protected her children and the children of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So before Karbala, as she was raising her children in her house, she raised them to be able to face any Islamic responsibility that would confront them. So they were brave and pious children. And she knew that there'll be a time where they'll need to show this bravery. And she was able to instill the amount of religiousness needed for them to be able to fulfill their Islamic duty even at a young age and even in such severe situations such as Karbala. So that's one aspect of it. Then the second aspect is after Imam Hussein alayhi salam was martyred, Sayyidah Zainab sacrificed her body to protect the children of the Ahlul Bayt. When the soldiers were attacking the tents, Sayyidah Zainab jumped in front of them so they wouldn't hit the kids. She tried her best. Of course, they reached the children as well, but she did everything she could to make sure they didn't. She was kicked, she was slapped, she was whipped. They did everything to try to get through her to the children. And she put herself and her body in front of them. Right? Now, for us in this society here, we don't have to physically protect our children like that. Inshallah, it never comes to the point where we will have to do that. But if it needs be, this will be something, if a certain occasion happens, you would have to throw yourself in front of your children to protect them. But right now we have to concentrate more on the first aspect of what Sayyidah Zainab did. And that's bringing up children who are able to face any difficulties that the society presents to them. Now we're living in a very different time than the time of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Than the Medina and Kufa and these places. It's very different here. The difficulties that our youth face are different than the difficulties that the youth of that time faced. We have to, with that in mind, we have to raise our children to be able to confront these difficulties and pass them, not succumb to them, not fall down to them, right? To be able to protect their religion no matter what the society presents them. Now, I don't know, I know some of you have immigrated to this country and I know some of you were born here. And I know you know this country well, and myself, I was born and raised here as well. But sometimes when we look at statistics, it helps us to get a better understanding. Because sometimes what we do is we seclude ourselves amongst our friends. So the brothers here, your friends are one another and you talk with one another, and you might be oblivious to what's happening around you and what's happening to the youth around you. So it's good to refer to statistics just to open our eyes a little bit. And it's never good to keep our head in the sand and pretend that nothing bad is happening. We always have to be aware so we can combat it. So I went online today. I had statistics for Australia, but I went and found some statistics for America, just so it's more applicable here. And I'll just read these statistics just to show you the type of society that your children and the youth are in. So these statistics come from a federal government source, and it's available online, but I can't attest to the authenticity. It's the government, but we'll see what they say. So first one, 13% of youth between the ages of 12 to 17 are clinically depressed. And clinically depressed is different than being sad. Right? So people are depressed, people are sad when certain occasions or when they face certain difficulties in life. Clinical depression is when that sadness affects their life in a negative way. And they say that not only are they clinically depressed, they've experienced a major depressive episode as well, where that means they can't move, they can't get out of bed for a period of time because of severe depression. So that's 13% of the youth are in that state, right? With regards to, and some of the things I'm going to say are a little taboo for the mimbar, but inshallah you can forgive me. I think it's important to talk about everything, and the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt used the mimbar to educate the community on various matters, so inshallah we won't get too upset. So another thing is sexual activity, right? So in 9th grade, 30% of children have had an intimate relationship. In 9th grade, 30, that's 1 out of every 3 kids, right? In 10th grade, 41%. In 11th grade, 54%. And in 12th grade, 64%. So the majority of the youth that, if your kids go to public school, the majority of their classmates have these intimate relationships. So if you want to pretend that nothing like this happens, right, your child will be confronting these issues without your help. So it's good for you to know so you could try to raise them in a way that they won't fall into sin. Right? You need to know these things. Violent crime. So a lot of youth are violent as well. So 16% of all violent crimes committed in the United States are performed by youth between the ages of 12 to 17. So there's a lot of crime and a lot of violence in youth as well. Suicide is also a problem. So 17% of teenagers have thought about suicide seriously. 13% have planned to commit suicide. So when you do suicide counseling, training, or whatever, they always ask you to ask when someone calls and they said that they're thinking of suicide, you ask if they've made a plan. And the reason why you ask that is because if they've made a plan, they're more serious about it. Right? So 13% have made a plan. 8% have carried out this plan and have injured themselves in some way. And 4,000 to 5,000 youth a year are successful in committing suicide and leave this world in that way. That's a big number when you think about it. Drug use and alcohol use is also, very common. So amongst teenagers and young teenagers, not old, not 18, 19, 20, young teenagers, 35% have drinking alcohol in the last month. 66% have tried alcohol in their life. And of those 66%, 18% before they were 13 years old. Right, so alcohol is something that's very common amongst high school age children or teenagers. 40% of teenagers smoke marijuana. 7% take hallucinogenic drugs, so that's like LSD and certain things like that. 6% ecstasy, 5% cocaine, and 2% heroin. So there's a lot of drug use as well amongst youth. So anyone who's been to high school in the United States, at least public high school, will know that drugs are everywhere. Right? So this age for a youth, right, a Muslim Shia practicing youth is very difficult. They're confronted with all of these things in their life. Their classmates, their peers are doing all of these things. And sin is, Allah has made sin attractive. Allah has made sin pleasurable. If it wasn't pleasurable, if it wasn't attractive, no one would sin. Right? There's a reason why people are inclined towards sin. It's because of, it has a nice face, but negative consequences. So when these teens are facing these problems and these difficulties, they'll succumb to it if they don't have a strong upbringing. Right? And we have to be very delicate in how we guide them and how we prepare them to face these troubles or these difficulties. Because if we're too harsh, then they'll turn away from us and they'll turn their backs. And you could see, I don't know about this masjid, I've only been here twice now, but in many masjids around the Western world that I've been to, the youth age group is absent. So I'll give you an example. When I went to Luton in the UK, I went to the masjid. It's a huge masjid. There's 300 families that are members of this masjid. So it's a very big masjid. I had a great time there. But when you go there, you have either the elders, the very old people of the community, and the children. And you don't have anyone in between. right? So once the child reaches an age where they could tell their parents, I don't want to go, and their parents can't force them anymore, they stop going to the masjid. Until they reach a certain age where they realize that religion's important and they want to come back to religion. Or they have kids and they want to bring their kids, right? But the age group from between 18, 19 years old until about 35 is almost completely absent there, right? Because the way that they were raised and the experiences that they had in the masjid turned them away from religion, turned them away from the masjid. Right? It's a delicate time, so we have to be careful in how we approach youth. So today what I want to do is I want to go over 3 age groups and look at these 3 age groups a little bit, examine them, see what difficulties they face, see what approach the parents should take. And then after that, I'll go over an overall type of advice in trying to, make kids love Islam and love the religion and how we could instill this positive thought within them, inshallah. So we know that there's many traditions, many ahadith, which talk about raising children. We don't have a complete system, right? So sometimes we have to fill in the dots. But there's one tradition that's referred to a lot. And in this tradition, the Imam breaks the life of children into 3 stages. The first 7 years, second 7 years, and third 7 years. It says in the first 7 years, you should allow your children to have freedom, right? They should be the king, basically, and you serve them. Now, it doesn't mean you don't teach them responsibility. It doesn't mean you don't teach them social etiquette, but you don't say no constantly to them. You let them run around. You let them experience things. Then the second 7 years, right? So that's between 7 to 14. You give them, you treat them as a servant, right? So you become the king, and you lay down the law, and you make sure that they follow. You teach them responsibility in that age, or obedience in that age. And then the third 7 years is 14 to 21. You have them as your minister, your wazir, and you consult them in family affairs, and you let them make decisions, or you let them, express their opinions, so they could learn to become an adult, and they could learn how to take care of a family when they reach that age. So these stages, right, are stages that we have to examine. I'm not going to talk about each one of these stages tonight, though. I'm going to start with early adolescence, which is at an age between around 9 to 13. So it's in the stage where you're the king, the parents are the king, and the children's are the servant, right? So the difficulties in this age is that the children are disorganized. Right? Between 9 to 13, they're learning how to organize their lives. So sometimes you'll see that their rooms are messy, that they forget things, they're distracted easily. That's normal for that age. And it's difficult sometimes for parents. So if parents force them to clean their room, if parents are overbearing with them, it might not have the desired effect that you want. It might be a little too early for that, right? They also think that they should have more freedoms. They don't consider themselves a kid anymore. So when you have children, like they don't want to play with kids' toys anymore. They think that they're bigger, right? Which they are bigger. And sometimes parents don't recognize that quickly enough. And the parents treat them younger than they feel they are. And when their parents do that, they act out, right? So they become, they resist. They test the limits, right? And testing the limits means they vandalize or shoplift or prank calls, drugs. At this age is when they start with drugs and things too. So it's dangerous if the parent isn't someone that's supportive, right? They're going to lash out, they're going to test the limits, and it could be detrimental to them in the future, right? So it's important. It's a very important age, and I know many of you know my history. So the brother, Rick gave you a little bit of it before. So I wasn't always Muslim, and at this age I wasn't Muslim. I converted when I was 16. So I remember this age as a regular American kid growing up in Los Angeles, and I did all those things, testing the limits, vandalizing, and everything. Right? God, inshallah, will forgive me. But these are things that is a normal experience. So if your child's not doing it, those around them are. So you should, be aware of that. Now, the challenge to the parents is to insist that the child act responsibly. Right? Remember, this is a stage where we're supposed to be kings and they're supposed to be servants. Right? So you have to make sure that they are acting in a responsible manner. But you also have to keep a positive connection. So if you're too overbearing and too harsh with them, they'll turn away from you. And if they turn away from you, they'll turn towards their peers in school. And that's what you don't want them to do. So you need to keep this line of communication open with them and positive. Right? You need to be supportive of them. Okay? Now, when they get a little older, so mid-adolescence, which is between 13 to 15, this becomes even more dangerous. Right? This is like the most dangerous age, I think, is 13 to 15. It's the most rebellious age for children. And this is where they start to have intense relationships with their friends. So before this age, they have friends that they play with, right? But at this age, they spend a lot more time with these friends. And their friends become their world, right? So parents become secondary. Right? It's good to keep a strong family, but you have to realize friends, they need friends at that age, and they're going to have friends. Now, I'll talk a little bit later about friends and the importance of having good friends, but know that at this age, they'll have friends. So if they don't have good friends, they're going to have bad friends. So we have to be careful of that. Now, when the parent wants them to be at home more, and the teenager wants to be outside of the home more, there's always this conflict. The child will lie to get out of consequences, and peer pressure is very difficult at this time. Right? So at this time, the children are looking for what's called immediate gratification. Right? So there's some theories which state that the human brain doesn't form until the mid-20s. So at this age, they have more freedom, but they don't have the brain capacity, at least the prefrontal cortex is not completely developed, so they're not able to plan as effectively. And they seek immediate gratification instead of delayed gratification. And this affects their decisions and their judgments. Now, the challenge to the parents is to be harsh with them at this time. Not so harsh that they turn away, but you have to do nahi al munkar. So if they're thinking of trying drugs at this time, you know that that's going to possibly destroy their future. You have to stand up to them and not allow them, right? So you have to make sure that you prevent them from making decisions that's going to harm their life, right? A lot of times that causes conflict, and that'll cause fights within the family, right? The parent will have to fight the kid, and they'll yell at, the kid's going to yell back and is going to act out. But at this time, the advice that's given to the parents is not to fear conflict, right? Your child's future is more important than a little fight that's going to happen right now. A lot of parents succumb at this stage. They try to prevent their kid from doing something. The kid acts out, fights back, and then the parent gives up because they don't want to fight. They don't want this conflict. But in this time, it's tough, it's hard, but conflict is something you shouldn't shy away from at this age. Then when they get older, they reach the third stage of the tradition where they become the wazir, they become the minister, where you're consulting them with the affairs of the family so they learn how to conduct their own family in the future. This is a very important age. And if you've raised them well until 14, they should be able to soak in this new information that they get from you, and you should be able to train them, and it should be very effective. So if they make it this far, if you do good until then, this third 7 years shouldn't be that difficult. But if you've laxed in the first 14 years and you haven't performed your responsibility as you should, then these 7 years will be very hard. right? So it doesn't mean you give up, but you definitely start from the beginning. So everyone who's planning on having children soon or have children that are very young, make sure you implement these things from the beginning. Don't wait until it's too late to start, basically. Now, with late adolescence, so between 15 to 18, the kids are more independent, much more independent. They could drive now. They go outside of the house for longer periods of time, and that could be potentially dangerous for religion, right? They could be faced with many difficulties, all the difficulties that we mentioned that the society throws at them, right? And you're not next to them, right? They're outside, they're working, right? They're outside for extended periods of time, and they need this independence to learn as well, right? So the challenge is to give them the freedom, but also keep communication with them so that they will come to you when they need you, right? So you have to be supportive. You have to have a relationship with them where it's open, where they could talk to you. So a lot of families, at least Eastern families that I've seen, their children come to me, right? So no one in this community here, but other communities that I've been a part of. The youth come to me, and they talk to me about serious things that they're facing. One of them has come to me and said that they got a girl pregnant out of wedlock. One of them came to me who's on drugs. And these are youth that are in the masjid. These are youth who, they have beards, they wear hijab, they're religious, they're at the masjid all the time. But still, they face these problems. Right? Don't pretend they don't exist. You pretend they don't exist, that's when they fall into this stuff. So I tell them, I give them advice, and I tell them, talk to your parents about it. Seek their help as well. And they say, no way, right? With my parents, our culture doesn't allow us to talk about these things, and, there's all these cultural barriers that prevent them from having this open and necessary relationship with their parents, and so they're forced to look elsewhere. Now these people, because they're in the masjid, they come to a sheikh. If they're not in the masjid, who are they going to go to? Right? If they're embarrassed to come to the sheikh, who are they going to go to? They're going to go to their peers. If their peers are into negative things, they're going to tell them, forget about their parents. Right? As I said, I was a teenager. When peer pressure comes, people tell you, just lie to your parents. You say, I can't go out, I have a curfew. They'll say lies, say you're at the library, say you're studying or something. Right? They'll teach you how to lie to your parents. Right? And if you don't have that relationship, you're gone, you're done. Right? You won't be able to guide them. Right? The point is not to lock them away from society so that, you can protect them behind closed doors. The point is to have a relationship so when they're confronted with the difficulties of society, they'll come to you and you could guide them. Right? Because that's when the guidance is necessary. Now, as I said, I'm going to give some general advice on how to raise a child, inshallah, that will be able to confront these difficulties. And what, in my opinion, through talking with other ulama and reading a bunch of books on these subjects, one of the most important things is to instill what I call positive thought in the child. And positive thought, which means like a positive ideology, a positive outlook on Islam, a love for Islam, right? And positive thought will lead to positive qualities. Then if you have a good atmosphere, a good environment in the house, these positive qualities will lead to action. And then as action repeats, it leads to habits, and habits will protect the children against the difficulties of society. If they're able to habitualize positive traits, then they'll be able to protect themselves in dangerous situations. Right? So they need to have that strength. Now, how do you create that? How do you create this positive thought, this love for Islam, this love for Allah? Right? And I'm not talking about memorization of facts. Right? So a lot of times our Saturday or Sunday schools teach our children facts about Islam, which is good. They should know the names of the imams, of course. It's good for them to know the dates of their births and shahadats. It's good for them to know the names of prophets. It's good for them to know historical events that happen in the lives of prophets and the imams. These are all good. It's good for them to memorize chapters of the Quran. All great. But if they don't have this attachment, this heartfelt attachment with religion, none of these facts will matter. If they have that heartfelt connection, they'll learn the facts because they want to. They'll be excited to learn more about Islam. So that connection is the most important thing, right? Many people, I've met many people who have unfortunately grew up in a masjid and memorized Quran, would recite Quran, and then because their parents didn't raise them in the right way, because they themselves weren't as sincere as they should have been, they've turned away and completely changed, 180%, right? A complete change. And they are completely different people. They have all the facts, but they didn't have that heartfelt love, right? Now, one thing that's important for us to do is with regards to friendship, right? So children will have friends. And you, especially at a young age, you decide who these friends will be to a certain extent. You can have play dates when they're young with other members of the community. The children should be able to, children in this masjid, at least, should be friends with one another. They should see each other outside of the masjid. Right? It shouldn't be the only time that they see members of the community is here, at night, when they're half asleep. Right? You should go to each other's houses. You should make the effort for them to be connected with each other. Right? And that way, you'll have religious Shia friends. Right? And that's the most important thing. Now, friendship is so important. It's not only for children that friendship is important. For adults as well. For everyone, friends are very important. Right? So, I'll read you a couple hadith. One from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, there is no worship similar to taking steps on the righteous path with one's brother in Islam and spending time with them. So spending time with a brother or sister in Islam is considered worship. Right? If you have the right intention, that I'm going to go to this coffee shop with my fellow mu'min, and we're going to sit down and drink coffee and have a good time, right? And laugh with each other. And I'm going to do this for Allah, it's worship. Just spending time with another brother is worship. Going to each other's house, right? That's worship. You get reward. Why? Because friends influence one another. If your friend is a mu'min, he will influence you. If you're a mu'min, you will influence him. Right? So it's important to have good friends. For youth, it's more important because youth are more inclined to be pressured by their peers. So if they have positive friends at that age, then they'll be encouraging each other towards religious activities. And what's better than that? And for adults, we need friends. We need, outside of the family to spend time with, to encourage us and give us more energy to, perform our religious duties. Another tradition from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, the most prosperous of people is he who mingles with honorable people. So when you meet someone who's religious and pious, spend time with them. Right? As I said, don't make the only time you see one another in this masjid. Now, of course, in these nights, every night you come to the masjid, so there's not much you could do in these few nights. But throughout the year, make sure that you spend time with each other, both inside and outside the masjid. It's very, very important for building the community and strengthening the community. Now, another thing we should do is instill our children or teach our children to have a relationship with Allah. So not just perform rituals. Right? That's another thing I see when we teach our children about Islam. We teach them how to recite the adhan, how to pray, how to fast, how to perform wudu, how to do ghusl, and what's najis, what's tahir. We teach them all these things, which is great. We need to do that. I'm not saying don't. You have to do that. But more important than that is having them create a relationship with Allah. Right? So for instance, with my son, before he goes to bed or after he prays, I tell him, talk to Allah. Right? Tell him about your day. Right? Remember, sometimes in our cultures, the only time we speak to Allah is when we need something from Him. Right? Give me this, give me that. Right? No. Allah is everything to us. Right? He's our friend when there's no one with us. Right? We should have a relationship with Him. And if our children do, they create this love with Allah. They see Allah as a protector. They see Allah as someone who's in their life, tangible. They can feel Him. And that instills this love of Islam. Right? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, believers cling to Allah and are afraid with what wealth hoarders and world worshippers cling to. So a believer clings to Allah, holds fast to Allah. Allah is the most important thing in their life. And of course, the imams also as a vertical line with Allah. So teach them to have a relationship with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and with Allah directly. The third thing is perseverance. Right? So the dangers that youth will face in this society are difficult. We have to acknowledge that. Right? It's not the same as when the older generation was growing up either here or in other lands. It's a different society. And the difficulties that they face are different. And we have to acknowledge that they're hard, and we have to know that without perseverance, they won't make it. If they're not able to persevere and struggle to maintain their religion, they'll collapse. Right? So perseverance is one of the most important attributes that we could provide our children with. We need to teach them that. We need to teach them that you need to keep moving forward. You need to keep grinding, as they say. Right? If you fall down, get up. Right? Don't succumb to failure. Don't allow failure to happen. Keep moving forward. We have to teach them these slogans and make them, make them internalize them. Right? So there's a tradition also from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And this is, I love this tradition. He says, if our Shia persevere, right? So the Shia, we need to persevere. If we have this quality of perseverance, so if we persevere on the true path, a number of things are going to happen. First, angels will greet them. Right? So if you want angels to greet you and to talk to you, you need to persevere. If you want your children to meet angels, you have to teach them to persevere. Right? Persevere means when sin is in front of your face and it's difficult for you to refrain from it, you refrain from it anyways. Right? It's not the sin that's easy. Right? Right now, if someone comes and puts alcohol in front of my face, I'm not going to be tempted to drink it. It's not going to be a big feat to refuse this cup of alcohol. Right? But there's certain sins, and everyone is different, but there's certain sins that when they're in front of you, it's hard to reject it. Right? That's where perseverance is important. Where you're tempted and severely tempted to commit a sin, but you refrain. Right? Because Allah is more important. Because religion is more important. Your akhirah is more important. You don't want to disappoint Allah or the Imam, so you refrain from it. Right? That's what we mean by perseverance. And if you do that, angels will greet you. Clouds of mercy will gravitate over them. Right? So mercy will fall on them. They will illuminate like the day. They will be sustained by the heavens and the earth, and Allah will give them whatever they want. So perseverance is very important. The fourth one, and there's only 5. The fourth one is nutrition. Right? So there's a connection between the body and the soul. Right? And this connection is seen in many traditions. So traditions which state, for instance, if you drink alcohol, your prayer is rejected for 30 days or 40 days. Right? So we have plenty of ahadith which show a relationship between food and spirituality. So one of the important things that we should do is make sure that our food is halal. Don't give our child haram food. Now, of course, there's a difference when we give them haram food intentionally or unintentionally, or we ourselves, when we consume haram food intentionally or unintentionally. Right? Sometimes we think that something is halal when in reality it's not. It wasn't slaughtered correctly, or someone lied somewhere down the line, and this haram meat, we consume it. The ulama are of different opinions of what effect that has on our soul. So some scholars of akhlaq say that you'll lose your taqwa if you eat haram meat, even unintentionally. And that means that if you were a muttaqi, you're no longer one. Even though you didn't commit a sin, it was halal for you to eat it, but in reality, this meat was haram, so it has this negative effect. Other teachers of akhlaq, which I tend to agree with, say no, you won't lose taqwa because you didn't commit a sin. Remember, we defined taqwa last night as performing our wajib actions and staying away from the muharramat. So you've done that. It was permissible to eat this food, right? It was unknown. You had certainty that it was halal, but in actuality it wasn't. And you had no way of knowing that. Right? So the second group of teachers of akhlaq say that won't have the same level of consequences. It will lower your status a little bit, but not to the point where you lose taqwa. Right? Now, that being the case, even if we unintentionally give our children haram food, their status will be lowered a little bit. That doesn't mean we should be overly conscious, because sometimes when we're overly conscious and overly picky, it has negative effects as well. But we should care what we're feeding our children and ourselves. We should make sure that, I don't know if they have halal certification here or not, but we should make sure that, the meat that we're giving them is halal, and so it doesn't have these negative consequences. Now, if we intentionally eat haram meat, we're committing a sin, and the consequences are much greater than unintentionally. But inshallah, I don't think anyone here would intentionally eat haram meat. Now, the last one, the fifth thing that we need to do is show kindness to our children. And this is very important. We need to perform amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. We need to bid them to the right and forbid them from wrong. We need to be stern at appropriate times. But even our sternness has to stem from kindness, not from anger. Sometimes our children will do something that we become angry with, and then our anger speaks to them. No, we need to be kind. Even if kindness is showing them, heart is punishing them. But we always have to do it with our mind of kindness and guiding them. We should never do it as just retribution because we're angry. And it's something parents need to look inside themselves, and every time they get angry, make sure they don't treat their child with this anger. It's really important. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, treat your close family and friends who sin. Right? So these are close family and friends who sin. Right? They're not perfect. These are sinners. How should we treat them? With nothing but compassion and righteousness. Give them hope. Right? Hope that they could turn back and they could be successful in religion. If you tell them, you did this, you have no hope, you're going to hell, get away from me, that's not going to bring them back. You have to give them hope that Allah will forgive them. You need to strengthen their broken spirits, and you need to rebuild them. So when you're punishing your child for doing something wrong, you have to do it with the mindset that you're rebuilding them, that this punishment will bring them closer to Allah. It will help them to prevent them from committing sin in the future. If you're just punishing them because out of anger, out of respite, because you got bothered by what they did, and the punishment serves no purpose just to put your own heart at ease, that's not going to help them. Right? So you need to have a positive outlook on them and on the community as well. Now, inshallah, tonight, I want to talk a little bit about Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. So I think it's always good in these nights of Arba'in, at least to dedicate one night to the masa'ib and the tragedies of Imam Sajjad. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa la al-arwah allati halat bifinaik. Alayka minni salamu la jami'an abadan ma baqitu wa baqiya layli wa nahar. ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. So inshallah, let's take our hearts to Medina, to Baqi, to where our Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is alone. There's no one around him. So alhamdulillah, I've had the pleasure of going to Mashhad, and Mashhad is full. Anytime you go to Mashhad, there's people there. There's a beautiful shrine. Right now, there's millions and millions and millions of people walking to visit Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to go to the shrine. But Imam Sajjad is alone. There's no one there, there's no shrine, there's nothing. And this is how he's been for a long time. Now, when we look at his life after Karbala, we see that he was constantly mourning, constantly in azar for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He was constantly crying. Whenever he saw water, he would cry. Whenever he saw someone slaughter an animal, he would ask them, "Did you give this animal water?" They would respond, "Of course. It's human to give water to animals." And he'd respond, "But they killed my father at Shana, thirsty." He would constantly cry. He cried for years, so much so that his own companions would come to him and say, "Why are you still crying? It's been a long time, stop." And he'd say, "Look, Yaqub had 12 sons. One of these sons went missing. And Yaqub knew he was still alive, but he cried so much that he went blind. I lost my father, my brothers, my uncle, everyone in one day." Right? The masab of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is not when he got poisoned. It's not when he became a shaheed. Right? That was beautiful for him. He lost his life. He was able to meet his father, Imam Hussein. He was able to meet his grandfather, Imam Ali, his grandmother, Fatima Zahra. He was able to meet Rasulullah. His shahadat was his victory. His masa'ib is what happened in Karbala. His masa'ib is when Imam Hussein alayhi salam calls out, "Hal min nasirin yansurni." When his father is asking, "Is there anyone to help me?" And he can't get up to help him. When he knows his father is going to be slaughtered and he can't get out of bed, he tries, he gets a stick or a sword, he tries to push himself up, he can't. He's too weak. That's his masab. Think about that. Your father is outside the house about to get killed and you can't go out to help him. Think of that. That's his masab. His masab is when Shimmer walks into his tent after he kills his father with the sword that's bloodied and dripping blood of his father on the ground. He's looking at the red sword. He's watching the blood drip off of the sword and he can't do anything. This is the masab of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. When the army was chasing after the women of Hussein, when they were chasing after the children, when they were ripping the earrings out of their ear, when they were kicking him to the ground, when they slapped his aunt Zainab in the face, when they pushed her and kicked her and whipped her, and he couldn't do anything. That's the masab of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. When they chained him and they dragged him through the desert as a prisoner, as a rebel, when everyone looked upon him as a criminal, and he's the imam with that status, that's his torture. But the worst is what I mentioned yesterday. The worst part of the torture of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was when they shackled him and made him walk through the Qatl-Gah. They made him walk through the area where all the shuhada were lying on the ground. And they made him look at his father in the state that his father was in. His father was uncovered. His father was headless. His father had 300 wounds on his body. His finger was cut off so they could steal the ring. And they make him look at Imam Hussein. They make him look at his dad in this state. That's the Masahib of Imam Sajjad. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.